Tuesday, and welcome to the MSLead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. And we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned.
The views and opinions expressed by our guest, Joe Medicis, are solely his own and do not reflect the opinions of his employer. Enjoy the show.
You didn't even fix your makeup this time, Mary. What's going on?
Why do I need to?
That's not a nice way to start. Chad.
Well, okay. All right. Well, hey, welcome back to another episode of MSLead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. And we've got a great show lined up today. I'm one of your hosts, Chad Fellers, along with my sidekick, who actually tells me what to do, when to do it, and cleans up after me every once in a while. Actually, she hasn't started doing that yet. Hopefully she'll start doing that again soon. Mary Morton. How are you, Mary?
I'm terrific. It's
Oh,
a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
well, okay. That's enough. That's all I was wanting to know. Just like this nice little pleasantry before we actually get going. So, yeah, why are you looking at me like that, Mary? All right, we're rambling enough. Let's get into the topic today. It's going to be really good, right? I'm going to let you tee up our guests. All I can say to our listeners is I've had a few minutes before the show just to get to interact, and you're in for a treat today. It's going to be really good. So with that, drum roll, Mary.
All right. So I get to introduce our guest today. Today we have with us the amazing, incomparable Joe Medicis,
Yeah.
PharmD, loved
sweet.
by all. I've heard so many people that I have talked to over the years that are like, I got my start because of Joe. I was encouraged to do these things in my career because of Joe. So if you're looking for a mentor, he's your guy. So Joe's background and industry has been with a lot of smaller entrepreneurial startups, and we were just talking actually before the show about the different disease states and therapeutic areas he's worked in. A lot of them have been really pioneering areas where they've been first. And so who better to talk to us about bringing to market a product that is first in class and also first in disease. So we're not going to get into too much of the intellectual property, private stuff, but we're going to pick his brain today. So welcome to the show, Joe Medicis.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. You know, look at me with these two famous medical affairs people who made really a lot of people's lives better.
Infamous. Maybe not famous, but infamous. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
That's great. But not just patients, but definitely a lot of people in medical affairs know you guys, and you know what you're doing here. I think is really cool. It makes for some good entertainment at the very least, and maybe some learning at the other end of the spectrum. So
yeah, no, we like it. We like it. So we are going to be discussing the topic I just described. So before we get too far down the line, Joe, I thought that as Chad always instructs our guests to tell us, a couple of takeaways that our listeners are going to be able to pull with them.
yeah, I would say, when you're working in biotech or startups, I mean, there's a lot that you have to focus on. First of all, always follow the data. The data is going to lead you to whether the solutions, good or bad or indifferent. The second is be massively flexible. Think outside of your current role or whatever you're doing, and you won't be doing that. And when you go to a startup or a biotech, and then be super patient centric in your approach. Like everything you do at the end of the day, it involves a patient. And if you think about that in those terms, nothing will go wrong.
All right.
I love it.
Besides,
Nothing will go wrong.
out of business.
Well, no,
That
I know what you were saying. I know what you were saying.
phase 3 results or whatever, but you'll as long as you're doing all those three things, you'll find yourself in a good place in the next gig.
Joe, so can you first share a little bit about like what was it that made you want to really pursue the startup environment? What do you think it really takes to really be in that environment and thrive in that environment? I'd love to hear just kind of like what drove you to be interested in that type of role.
Well, thanks, Chad. I mean, you yourself have been in a couple of these companies, so you know what it takes. It takes a lot of flexibility. It takes, a good understanding of what you're getting yourself into, and a willingness to, grab whatever projects are in front of you or in front of the company and, get to them. You'll have a lot of visibility with your CEO, your CMO. You're going to want that, but you have to select what you're going to do, right? So, like before you jump in, like, oh, this is a startup, sounds great, could be, snake oil. Don't do that. Make sure you look at the data, go through phase 2, make sure the company is being realistic with their expectations that they're setting, right? And if they're not, then that kind of tells you, what it'll be like working there. And by making sure they're not overstating the promise of what could be gained from the new med or new diagnostic or drug and diagnostic combination. So
I think that's great advice. But I'm thinking about even just kind of the vast variety of listeners that we have, like even those that have just started within medical affairs. They got their first role maybe in maybe a larger organization, but trying to figure out, does it make sense to even think about a startup? If we can, like how did you evaluate some of those things? Can you just share maybe one experience, good or bad, that helped you lead, that led you to accepting a role?
yeah, no, I would say one of the things is life is about timing. Of course, you can't control a lot of that, as you know, in medical affairs, things come and things go. But one of the things I definitely learned was to stay close to the recruiting industry, and the top recruiters, and anybody gigs that I ever looked to take, I always call trusted recruiters because they know better than anybody what's coming, who the people are that they're there already, what the environment's going to be like, and then you apply sort of your scientific knowledge and wherewithal there, and then hopefully you have some therapeutic expertise that matches up as well, and that's where you see the wins, the potential wins. But you got to be willing to take risks, right? Because I had four companies go down in flames in a row, and so that meant new jobs every year and a half. But it also had some ones that turned out to be really good as well. So that's there's some luck born in that, I think. I always like to say it's better to be lucky than smart sometimes in this startup world, but that does definitely play into it.
Well, this is all really good advice because a lot of people don't know, like you said, Joe. I want to go to work for a startup. Why? I don't know. Everybody else is doing it, but you need to make a smart decision. And like you said, you can go into it making a smart decision, and they say no risk, no reward. It could have very easily, some of these that didn't turn out like you hoped could have turned out to be the big winner, the big retirement payoff, so, but it's all fun. And if you're adventurous, then I wouldn't stop chasing stuff like this.
Life's too short not to have adventures, right?
I totally agree.
I think so.
You don't want to be bored.
That's right.
When's the last time you were bored, Joe?
Been a while.
So with the position that you're in now, and actually probably a lot of them in the startup situation, what are some of the hardest parts or the challenging pieces of being one of the first in medical affairs?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things is when you come on board, figuring out whether you have to start a project, or restart a project or take it over for somebody else. And if you're taking it over from somebody else, a lot of times they don't want to give it up. If it's something that now falls under the medical affairs world and you're one of the first medical affairs employees, then, you have to figure out how to, do that carefully, without, moving anybody's cheese, if you will, but you do have to understand all the internal, external dynamics of that. And I think that's the most important thing. Like when you come into a company, understand that there's going to be broad implications for your role when you're one of the first handfuls of medical affairs employees. It could involve, anything from patent strategies to building the company's website. And I mean like the company's website, not just your medical affairs website, right? So, and helping, it could be any of those things that, help you to develop a better presence as a company and a way to communicate the scientific data, more rapidly, more transparently, quicker, having digital presence. But you just have to have a willingness to contribute in every area, wherever the need is. I used to be a good staple fixer at one company. Whenever the electric stapler broke, I would come and fix the stapler, but that's kind of an extreme, but you got to be willing to do that and have fun at it, right? So that's part of the whole thing.
Did you add that to your resume though?
No.
I was going to say business card, so I didn't know where you were going with that, Mary, but that would have been good.
What's the smallest company that was small at the time that you joined?
In terms of employees,
Right.
I think I was 5 at one, number 5.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Wow. I'll have to ask you later which one that was.
Yeah.
So for people who maybe have not worked in a startup environment before, who don't know, who are you going to be directly accountable to, in terms of who are your most critical internal stakeholders in a company that is in that startup mode? I mean, who are your stakeholders internally?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to want access to your CEO and CMO. If during the interview process you're not getting that, then you'll know right away that, this is might not be the right role. Certainly on any senior leaders in medical affairs that you would, have, obviously those would be critical stakeholders. If you're not the head of medical affairs at that point, you might come on as head of medical and not be later. So there's a lot of things to think about when you do that. Obviously, there's going to be an early commercial team, meaning, like market analytics folks, marketing, perhaps chief commercial officer. A lot of times the CCO is the person to bring on the medical affairs people because they know they need them. And then clearly the clin dev leaders from phase 2, they're the ones who pulled off the study, and they're usually in the startup environment. They're bringing you in during phase 3, and they're trying to pull their phase 3 study through, and they're looking for people to help them with that. So whatever experience you have working in, sponsored trials, comes in super handy at that point. And then the other thing that's kind of weird is I ended up on some companies on some investor calls, not like Wall Street calls per se, but like calls with investors, taking calls with a CEO, CMO, and investor community, or a single investor, which was kind of fun and cool, but definitely high stakes, but you have your talking points and it's all rehearsed. So you just never know who you're going to be talking to from the internal stakeholder standpoint.
So I have to follow up on this now because I've been thinking about this a lot, Joe, over the past couple of years. Well, when I felt like I was in the halfway point of my career, like I'm the back half, like I wanted to see like, how do I really maximize and my giftings and things like that. So I took time, I wrote a personal mission statement and things like that. The statement around it was really to equip individuals, Yeah, yeah, it was individuals, teams, and organizations with strategies and tactics that position medical affairs as a strategic pillar within the organization. So I guess my question to you is, how important was that time as far as setting the tone as to what type of stakeholder medical affairs is going to be for the long run for the organization? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of the key things there is follow the data, right? So wherever the data has led the company to now and where it could in the future is things you have to think about, right? So Chad, in your circumstance, like if you can, obviously, if you could predict the future, you would be, wonderful, right? But you can't, at least
Sure.
as far as I know. Seem like a nice guy, but predicting the future, I don't know. Mary predicts the future, but not us folks in medical.
I
Um,
do. And if the
you
price
do.
is right, I might
Might
give
tell
you
us
the
how. We
information I can.
appreciate that. Yeah, you played a lotto tonight. But seriously, one of the things you can do to make people think that you can is to think about scenario planning. So you're in phase 2 and you're coming out of phase 2. What is the potential? What are the potential things that could happen in phase 3? And you start to think about all those scenarios. You could probably boil it down to the top 5 or 6, and then the more likely ones should come to light out of those. But each of those you should have scenario plans for. Like, if this happens, we're going to do Y. Sometimes if this happens, it's we're going to be looking for new jobs. But if it's sometimes if this happens, in phase 3 data looks bad or something like that. But if you can predict, like, based on what scientifically, what you think the change from baseline, et cetera, is going to be, and the difference between placebo, and take a guess, like, it's going to go this way or that way, what would the implications be? Sometimes it's like, let's full bore. We're going to do this on our own. Maybe it's under these circumstances where the company's thinking they're going to not fully market, but they're definitely going to do the pre-approval process on their own. So you have to build out a small medical team in that circumstance. So you have to sort of think about those scenarios that could happen with the data, and then build your medical strategy based on that. And then it looks like you predicted the future because you were ready, but you really didn't predict the future. You're just ready for it. So,
Like a Boy Scout, be prepared.
like a Boy Scout.
Yeah. All right, Mary. I see you thinking over there.
I was thinking about how the Longhorns are number 1 in the nation.
I'm
I'm sorry, I drifted off. What needs to be done when we're talking about just generally first in class, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, with that, I think a lot of it is after phase 2 or around that time. Maybe you're not ready to build out your full field team yet, but you sort of have that circle outside the, original, primary investigators that have been working closely with the company in trial design, et cetera. And then, you have to think about what the entire landscape looks like. What you have to do is think about, how are you going to build out those relationships based on what's already established, and then make some decisions on whether or not it's something new totally, or it's an established market. It gives you different ways to think about things.
Okay. Chad, is there something you wanted to add?
I always have something to add, Mary. I think now, whether it's good or not, I'm not real sure, but I'm just thinking about this, Joe. We're thinking about kind of where things going in the future. Is there a spot for AI maybe to even help support this process, to make it even more efficient, quicker, potentially on some of these? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it'll be interesting to see maybe how that plays out over the years. Any thoughts about how you might be able to incorporate AI in this?
Yeah, well, the challenge with AI right now is, of course, it can do everything, right? At the same time, it can deliver nothing. So, as you know, Chad, through working with AI, it depends, right? Like, so a lot of times AI's use applications can be use situations can be very relevant and, be very helpful. And then a lot of times with AI, you go in there and you expect you're going to be able to find an answer, and you can't. So I don't know. I've never used it for, actually, I have tried to use it for looking for thought leaders and stuff, but it's not very useful in that way.
Not yet.
Right, not yet. But, and I think they're like that on purpose right now. But you could see where it should be easy to harness that potential, especially given that, there's already companies out there that already do this, CIA-ish in the background, because we know some companies. So, it's pretty cool what can be done. And there's a lot of potential there. We'll see what the future brings.
I love it.
But I'm bold on AI. I mean, I think it should be, it could be a lot of opportunity and make our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, augmented, and not artificial, but augmented intelligence, right? I think that's the key with that. So, yeah. So along the lines of that, so back to really kind of thinking about through being the first in class, in context to that. And I don't remember if you've actually been a part of a company that's had a Me Too or a follow-on drug, but can you talk about the differences, the unique challenges maybe that come with being a first-in-class compound?
In terms of new classes, new compounds, again, those create additional scenarios, but the bottom line is the data tells the story, right? We're always stuck with the data, good, bad, or indifferent. So if you follow that and you're true to it and you don't try to overstate it, you're fair, I think you're going to be in a good place. And so when you have a new compound or in first in class, there's always tons and tons of promise. My experience has been, it can come up a little short in terms of what can actually be when actually occurs. Phase 2 is 50-50. Phase 3 is hopefully 75-25 that you're going to go the right way. So, but you just never know what's going to come out of those opportunities. I think, Chad, in your experience, I mean, do you agree with that in terms of letting the data talk for itself, or what do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, 100%. I think it's. I was just thinking, reflecting back on a comment you said earlier. I think even the personality that I have, I think it's one of those things. Like I try to see the best in everything, and so sometimes I think if I'm thinking back in my career, I drank the Kool-Aid a little too quick. And instead of really being able to kind of look at it from more of an objective type of pragmatic approach, if you will, and it's bit me in the butt, if I'll be quite honest with you. I've learned some things. Now I'm thankful for that time, right? But I think it does help equip you for it when you're thinking about future choices and decisions, even about the therapies that are maybe in your own pipeline, right? I mean, to stay grounded on some of the promises that could potentially be there. So no, I fully agree with that. When we think about, from medical affairs, we talk about insights a lot. We talk about gathering the different types of insights, but I think that this is a little bit of maybe even of a different type of thing when you're in more of a startup type of role. Can you talk about the different types of insights?
Yeah, totally. I think, this insights world is obviously super hot topic in medical affairs, and we're all, dealing with how to collate insights and get them ready and get them out there. But in the environment where you don't necessarily have a field team even, I think the key thing is capturing a few things. One is the context of the circumstance. So wherever you are, you heard it on social media, you were at a medical conference, you talked to somebody directly, that's different context. All three of those are massively different contexts. Then it's the data, right? The information that you learned or got that's new or insightful, if you will. And then it's the implications, right? So it's the why it's important for the company to maybe just push the pause button for a second and listen. And I think that's essentially what insights bring, no matter what stage of company you're at. Like, it is essentially asking people to press pause and listen to what is being said in a different community. So that's why the medical insights thing can be so exciting and also so controversial sometimes. So, but it's fun. It's part of the fun.
So
I,
if I could just like throw in something, is that okay?
I
Absolutely.
guess so, Mary.
Well, I was kind of thinking about the recent rejection of the Lycos product. And so, there's such an uproar about that, why it didn't get approved. The the patient communities are upset, but then also these population of physicians who totally believe in it, and then
But
but
the point is well taken, whether it's that company or somebody else, right? Like, there always is a lot of hype, right? And everybody's looking for something revolutionary. And I think that when you see things like, whatever that is, take that example off the table, but you should bring to it a healthy dose of skepticism. And I am a skeptic. If people tell you who know me, know I'm a bit skeptical. Glass half empty, more than half. But but I think you should bring that healthy dose of skepticism, because what it allows you to do is to not so that you can like throw darts at ideas, but it allows you to solve problems. And again, if you bring that skepticism and you combine it with scenario planning, and those
okay.
two things are very, very powerful, especially when at the other end of it, you're very positive, for how to help the company and to help the company get the drug to patients in the bottom line, right? And
Yeah.
so I think those are two very powerful things. If you combine those two capabilities, you're going to have superpowers in medical affairs. You're going to look like you can predict the future as well as Mary Morton.
Well,
Yeah.
I refer to that as doomsday prepping.
Okay.
I like everything that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
I want to be prepared for it. So, of course, I couldn't do that in your job, but I try to do that in mine. But yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Chad.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. You can take it for a second. I do like the idea though that Joe, that is just even thinking about the importance of having, even when you think about just whether it's building a field team, whatever it is, right? You don't want to have everyone cut from the same cloth, and how important it is to, yes, you want to have people that are optimists, those that can kind of maybe even kind of see and try to think outside the box in ways. You need to have some that are very pragmatic. You have some really that are going to poke holes in everything, but all those things work together. If you incorporate all those things, your likelihood of I think increasing your probability of success or being more realistic. I think it definitely it helps that process. So I love that. At first when you said that, I got to be honest with you, I was like, oh, he's glass half empty. What does that really mean? And man, what a benefit that really is. I think, quite honestly. And it can really kind of shape the trajectory of like where things could even go and how you can even plan for 5 to 7 years down the road, even with a therapy potentially. I appreciate you being honest about that. That's really good.
You can take the glass half empty, right? And if you have your scenarios planned, you pour a little more water in it, basically, when it comes time, and then you're ready. You're really ready to go.
Not to steal Chad's line, but I love it. I know.
Yeah,
Well, I don't
yeah.
think you can. I don't think that you can develop a strategy for anything, if you don't approach it that way. But I like the. You can add a little more water. You can start filling the glass up whenever you conquer some of these issues. So one question I wanted to get to was, you have to kind of figure out what is your market potential going to be, because at the end of the day, you got to sell the product. And if you can't sell it, I'm sure that there are people who own stock in the company that are going, why are we doing this? So like, how would you go about evaluating what that market potential is going to be?
Yeah, great question. Not so easy to answer, of course. I think companies have unique ways of solving those problems nowadays with the way that drugs are priced, but we'll leave that for another conversation, perhaps. But I think, again, what you got to look for here in this circumstance is what's the true unmet need? Is it like overhyped, what's being said? Or is there truly an unmet need? And those are feels, functions, and survives outcomes that patients are experiencing that the FDA is interested in. If you can't get to those with what you have being clinically relevant, then you probably don't have something that's as exciting as maybe they're trying to be hyping on Wall Street or whatever. But everybody is the struggle is there's only a limited amount of investment dollars that are out there, and everybody's searching and racing for them. So everybody's going to try to understand that. But I think and try to race for that money, I should say. But I think what you can do as the person with science experience is to look realistically against what the true unmet need is. What's the real problem that the company's trying to solve for? And then if you start to think about what that is, you should be able to get an estimate of what the so-called market opportunity is. And that should create, drug companies can also have a great market opportunity, but then screw up the pricing. And, that's the end of drug company. We've all seen hundreds of examples, probably too many. There's other companies that, where it's rare, I should say it's rare where the company is not telling you how large the market is. And also the other thing is the thought leaders love to explain how large the market is. And then it doesn't always turn out to be that way. So do
you have to continue to validate that? If you have one resource that says this is the number of patients out there, and then you sort of estimate this is how many we anticipate we're going to capture. Do you you get a second opinion when you're sick and you go to the doctor and you're like, oh no, I can't do that. Do you have multiple resources that you kind of cross compare just to make sure you really understand what that market potential is?
Yeah, I think it's all of it. For drugs there, you have like a me too or an add-on or something. It's a new, not such a huge leap from the last drug. You kind of know what you can grab. And companies believe they know what they can grab, and those are more predictable scenarios. And oftentimes you see mergers and acquisitions occur faster in those situations than when you have like first drug for a treatment or first in class. First in class is maybe a little more like the previous, but definitely first drug. Orphan diseases, breakthrough therapies, those circumstances, I think, I don't know any better way than, the old ballpark way of assessing the market, unfortunately. I will say this, that a lot of effort goes into market research, and that's where I think it can be truly helpful. But again, you can't over-index on that because it's a lot of survey work, right? And those are fraught with error. So I think what you really have to look at is what is the true problem, the company's trying to solve for? And is it realistically a big problem, or is it, a small problem? Or is the difference that the company can make a big difference, or is it only a small difference? And you feel that when you get to know it, and you get to know the phase 2 data, and there's certain diseases people bring up the names and you recognize, oh my gosh, there's a huge unmet need there, right? And then there's others that maybe you've never even heard of before. So it makes it a little more difficult, for sure.
Right. So full confession, I know I asked this earlier a little bit about thinking about establishing medical affairs as a strategic pillar within the company. You'd already made some comments and answered about the importance of following the data, talking about scenario planning. We talked a little bit about that, but let's transition a little bit more about the establishing medical affairs, like what that all entails, what that looks like. And then even going down the road of like, when do we start building out teams? When should they be involved, et cetera? I'd love to hear kind of what your experience has taught you about this process.
Yeah, well, just like anything, right? Like earlier is better. You know, the earlier you can get to it, the better. But at the same time, you know, you can also hire people that you may have to let go later, which is no fun at all. But in terms of, you know, building out that strategy, it's, you know, get what you can get your hands on in terms of resources, sooner the better, but be honest with people about how it's going to go, you know, moving for the next few quarters, you know, as you can see the future.
Do you think phase 3, like if money were unlimited, I guess that's not a fair question, but do you think that ideally, when do you think that build out should take place? Should it be phase 2? And do you feel like that the more aggressive a company might be on doubling down there, the potential greater opportunity or ROI may come from it? I mean, I'm just wondering, because I've seen it several times where these teams build out 6 months or whatever before the drug launches, and I think that's way too late in many ways to do that. So I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on that, as far as when you think the ideal time would be in a perfect world to start building these things out for success.
Yeah, been there, so have you, right? So I think that you know, like I said earlier, is better. The more that you can convince people to sort of, you know, make the investment in medical affairs, that it will pay off in dividends. Sometimes it's good to take advantage of the boldness of some of the folks in the company on how bullish they are on the products. But I think that when you think about that, again, you have to be realistic with people about what things could happen, right? But definitely, I'm with you. I've seen situations where the plan for the field team is planned, you know, to start 2 years before launch, and instead it starts 6 months before launch. And there's no way to make up that time, no matter how many people you hire, or how many consultants you bring on board, or how much, you know, money you have to work with. There's just no way to make up that kind of time. And so you end up losing at your launch, and you lose with the relationships that you could have had. Eventually you'll get there, but, you know, that definitely will affect how a market, how a drug starts to make money out of its first year during launch, which is obviously the most critical predictor of success. So, I mean, we've all seen this before, and it's frustrating as anything when, you know, you go to your company's executives and you say, look, we think it's the time to pull the trigger. And they're like, maybe let's wait a little while. Oh, I want to see what happens with this. Oh, let's see this company's readout. But pretty much, I would say 75% of the time, that is a bad idea, because what ends up happening is, you know, you're behind now, and you cannot make 6 months equal 24 months. You cannot make a 6 equal a 24, no matter how hard you try. The same way you can't make 6% 24%, right? So there's just if you think of it in those terms, you know, that's basically what you're left to deal with. And as you know, Chad, it takes a long time. Mary, you too, like, to develop relationships with people and thought leaders who trust you, not just trust your product, but trust you as an individual. You just don't show up in their office and, you know, with a new set of slides, and they all of a sudden they trust you, right? So it just takes that time, and you just can't make that up any way. I've never seen a strategy that helps allow people to do that. So if you
I'm
know, let
really
me
glad
know.
we went to this part of the conversation,
Yeah.
because I'm actually seeing a lot of a lot of companies that are, I've been calling it kind of like skeleton crew. Like for as far as field medical, they'll hire like a national director and two or three MSLs or field medical directors or whatever they're calling them, and they're bringing them on like at phase 2A, and they're utilizing them, which I think is so smart, um, to be involved in trial enrollment, and patient identification. But all the while, they're developing relationships with people they're going to want to have relationships with ultimately anyway.
For sure.
Um, and
Yeah.
then conversely, I'm not going to name these companies by name, but there's this one company that is actually entering a crowded market, where nobody knows who they are, as a company in this specialty, that they hired their national MSL director, maybe a week before their NDA got approved or their BLA got approved.
Wow.
Um,
Good luck to
and
them.
I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah,
thinking, I mean, and the person doesn't have the disease state knowledge either,
of
and
course.
they hadn't hired the MSLs yet either. So I was like, and the drug looks good from what my amateur knowledge
Yeah.
is. But I'm like, this is,
Well,
it's,
from a recruiting perspective, think of the challenges it gives you, Mary. Like, if you only have a few weeks to onboard somebody, then you're going to have to make sacrifices, right? You're going to have
that's
to make
exactly what happens.
with therapeutic knowledge of the people you're bringing on board. You're going to have to make sacrifices with geography, where you can place people. I mean, there's talented medical affairs folks are not easy to come by. And especially when you have very specific disease states, you need to get out ahead of that so that you give yourself the time to find the talent that you need. And, if you're going to have to give on geography, right? Like, I'd rather hire two people that are awesome in the same city and split the state in half or split north and south from that state, than to sacrifice on talent for sure.
And for perspective for the listeners, if you didn't know this already, Joe's medical affairs experience includes being a VP of medical affairs, where he led everything in medical affairs. He's managed MSLs. He's led the strategy as a medical director, all of the things. So everything he has to say, he knows what the heck he's talking about.
Yeah,
So just
maybe
so
boots on
you
the
know.
ground. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I think it really speaks to strategy too, because some of the people I've talked to have considered one of these companies I was referring to. They're like, I really question their strategic insight that they've waited this long. And they're like, I don't think I'm going to pursue this opportunity because I'm not sure I'm going to be in great hands no matter how awesome the drug is.
Yeah. I don't know, Chad. I mean, sure, like when you interview with people, you have to trust the person you're interviewing with is going to be able to pull it off, right?
That's right.
Number one. But you also have to, if the person isn't honest with you and say, we probably should have hired you 6 months ago, and it's obvious, then like that maybe that person didn't even know they should have hired you 6 months ago. So I think a lot of it depends on the things that are obvious. We should be honest with each other about. We should be able to be honest with each other about. So those are some things to think about when you're talking to people, I think, right?
I think that this is even just speaks to a larger problem that I've seen in many ways, Joe. I'm sure you've seen it over the years too, is just, in industry, we tend to work in silos so much. And so we think of things as project management instead of thinking about the big picture in ways and tying all those things together, right? So the whole idea of we don't need to build out our medical affairs team until 6 months before, or whatever that looks like, right? It's because there's this lack of we think of things as more of processes in certain stages versus thinking about kind of the entire package. I mean, to your point about thinking about the KOLs and identifying relationships and establishing that and how important that is, we're not thinking of it that way. We're thinking of it as a transaction of, well, just clinical will focus on the PIs, and as soon as we get the study enrolled and the readout, et cetera, then we move from A to B. My whole purpose is just to get this, to have a successful study or to get it enrolled. They don't think about, okay, well, what types of endpoints, having all these conversations to be able to have somebody to start from beginning all the way through the life cycle of the product, right? So I think that actually speaks to even being able to communicate the value of medical affairs and how are we able to articulate that, and then showing the ROI. And that's always been the challenge, I think, with medical affairs, is how do we really show that from a dollars and cents standpoint. So I would love maybe even look at research to see, okay, where companies have been successful by starting things at an earlier standpoint, and the result, whether the data is the same as another drug as well too. Like, where are some differences and where are some opportunities that we can actually learn from some of these things, until we start thinking of things in a little bit different, in that more holistic view. I think that really separates and distinguishes companies about their potential success as well too. So anyway, that's one of my soapbox things that I would love to be able to figure out, that, the magic potion or the right formula to make that happen, to build that trust. But I think that's something that's sorely missing at times.
Do you think that's easier in a smaller startup? I mean, if that culture can be created at the start, or do you think as you bring in more people from the outside, whoever barks the loudest controls that dynamic?
I'll give you my perspective on that. Clearly, squeaky wheels get the grease. That's always the case. I'll say a couple of things, and maybe Chad, you can give me some opinions. I've been at some companies where, and I'm going to give you a shout out, Mary, to the recruiting industry. Believe it or not.
Joe, come on. Did she pay you for this?
Are you ready?
Come on. All right. Go ahead.
Where the strategy is, let's bring on a couple of people who know some medical affairs people, and they'll just recruit out of their network. And my experience with that is that sounds like good, cheap, inexpensive. But what ends up happening is that even if it's someone as popular as Chad, people want to, of course, come work with you. But but you only know what you know, right? Like, you only know who's available, who in your network might be available, and when you take people who are available at this time, you are going to make a sacrifice on talent, probably 1 out of 4 times. Sometimes you might end up with some bad hires because of that. But when you work with a skilled person who you trust in medical affairs, who's going to tell you, don't go to that person, go to this person. Like, we know how they've done at this company. I know their manager, et cetera. They also know who's available, but more importantly, who's not saying they're available, and are willing to, start to talk to other people that maybe you wouldn't know from your network, or aren't going to be so bold as to call you up just because you post a job and they liked you before. So I've seen that strategy a couple of times. I even one company where they relied on me, and I just don't feel like I pulled the team together, as good of a team together as I could have, had they allowed me to, use executive recruiter who specializes in medical affairs. I'm not talking about these run-of-the-mill, everybody wants to be a recruiter, folks, but I'm talking about people who really, know this business. They really, you don't know what they do behind the scenes. I'll give it away. They keep track of us all, what we say, what we tell them, and they know where our mindsets are. They kind of have like a CRM for for all of us out there.
Joe, after we wrap up the podcast, maybe I can connect later, and you can actually refer to me to one of those awesome recruiters that we were talking about that you were discussing.
One or two, yeah.
Oh! Sorry, Mary. I meant you. That's what I meant. So you're right. No, you're absolutely right, Joe. I think especially when we're thinking about just the value that we can bring, and when you think about even just the KOLs building that trust and things like that, you need professionals that are not only that can talk the science, but you can also talk relationships, understand dynamics, understand the business component of it as well too. To have high EQ to go along with the IQ, and when you don't have that time to really be able to explore, when you don't have the partnerships of someone who's been in the business for 20 years, who started when she was 2, would be an example, or something like that. She's so young.
I was on the Titanic a couple of weeks ago.
That's right. Well, I know. I'm fair and balanced, Mary. I'm fair and balanced. So this has been a good discussion. I am. It's been good. Thanks for embracing. Any final thoughts, Joe, from your end?
Nothing really. I mean, you guys have been a great fun. I've enjoyed this time with you.
I have to have you back because I have a whole section of things I wanted to ask you about, and I don't have time. So absolutely.
We'll get to it. We'll get there.
Thanks so much for taking the time, extra time actually, just to visit with us, to share with our listeners. Listeners, thanks so much for joining us for another podcast here at MSLead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. We don't develop in isolation. We need to learn from one another, and definitely think there's a lot of things that we can take away from Joe today. I can't wait to have him back on the show with us again. Until then, have a great day and lead well. Take care.